Hi everybody, this is Amy Mayer and I work at friEdTechnology, and I have my colleague Alicia here with me today because we are going to talk about digital tools for interactive writing instruction. And it's really kind of strange not to be able to see you or hear from you or anything, but I know that when this conference session is played, I'll be able to answer your questions in the chat. So I will be online when you are watching this. So I'll tell you a tiny bit about who I am, and then I want to introduce my colleague Alicia. I guess what matters to you most probably is that I am a former English teacher. So I taught English. I have taught 7th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, and 12th grade English. And I have also taught college English. I actually started out teaching college English. Then later on in my career, I went back and taught college English again. And my colleague Alicia, you did a lot with ELA too, didn't you?
Yes, I was an elementary teacher for several years and then a literacy coach for a large school district.
Yeah, cool. Well, so we're going to be talking to you about digital tools for interactive writing instruction. And one of the big problems that I had as a high school and college English teacher, and really, I don't know why I'm not saying middle school too, because it was really just as big of a problem then, but just the amount of grading that I had to do. And I really wish I would have had some of the tools and strategies that I'm going to tell you about today from the very beginning. So I kind of figured out when I was first teaching English how important it was for students to write. And that sounds kind of silly, duh, of course it's important for students to write, but it's important to be in the habit of writing every day. That kind of writing, I think I learned from you, Alicia, is called fluency. And I didn't have that term or know of that term when I was first, working with students on their writing. But I figured out that if my students were writing every day, they gained fluency. They were really able to crank out writing in a completely different way than they could do if they weren't used to writing every day. When I wasn't doing that, I would, ask my kids, "Hey, can you, let's get started on this essay." And maybe we would read an exemplary piece or whatever, and they would get a look at it. And that, what would they always say to you when you asked them that, Alicia, when you had students and you were saying, "Okay, let's get started. We're going to do a writing piece."
After they groaned and moaned about having to write, how
Right?
long does it have to be?
Uh-huh.
And
Yep. Yeah. And I don't have anything to write about.
yeah,
That's what I heard all the time. I don't have anything to write about. And I just thought, sure, you've got lots of stuff to write about. Well, when I started doing daily writing in my classroom, it really changed a lot of things. For one thing, writing didn't feel so arduous to my kids because we were doing it every single day. But I kind of feel like I know what y'all are thinking if you're watching this presentation today and you're thinking, Amy, you're crazy. I cannot grade my students writing every single day. I just can't. Like, it's bad enough as it is. How could you possibly do that and have kids writing every day? Well, the miracle is, the thing to understand is that you reading it is not what improves their writing. It's them writing it that improves their writing. So you have to find ways to motivate kids to write. And I know that's part of why you're reading their writing, because it's a lot more motivating to know when somebody's going to actually look at what you write. But at the same time, you reading it and marking it and giving a grade to it, that's not the miracle in writing instruction. It's really the daily writing. So Alicia, I don't think I've ever told you this before, even though we've worked together for years and years. We've worked in the technology field. So I want to tell you how I did daily writing in my classroom and how I found a way to manage it that would not just kill me on the grading side. All right, well, I'm going to show you how to do it within the Google ecosystem, because I'm hoping that the people here watching today, this session, have got Google at their disposal. There was a time when I just did this all with pieces of paper, but now I know if you're teaching remote, you're going to need to know how to do this digitally. So what this is that you're looking at is just a Google form. And when my students looked at it, it looked like this, just a Google form. And I asked them a question. If you could ask your classmates and me anything, what would you ask? Make it interesting. You'll be reading and commenting on these essays. So remember, if you ask a boring question, you're going to get boring answers and it will feel like eternity. The person asking the question and commenting on the essays will be the one getting the quiz grade for the assignment. The rest of the class will get a daily grade sometimes. So when kids came into my classroom to do their daily writing, they knew every single day when they came into class that they were going to be having a 10-minute essay. We did it every day. Very, very seldom did we not do it. So that whole I can't think of anything to write ended pretty fast. What I would tell my kids is if you can't think of anything to write, then write down, I can't think of anything to write until something comes into your head. And so far, nobody's ever written an entire page of I can't think of anything to write. I don't think I've ever seen it written more than maybe 3 times, actually. Something will come to you, but you've got to keep writing. So, my job while the kids were doing their 10-minute essay was I walked around the room. Went up to people I saw weren't writing and said, don't forget to keep writing. Hopefully they start moving their pen again. And eventually they get into a mode where they're really able to do, much longer pieces during that 10-minute period. And once they got into the ability to do this, then I would also write with them. So you notice that I asked them to tell me questions that they would want me to answer. And sometimes kids would write questions that I knew, that student probably meant that question for me, but sometimes it's also really interesting to see what they would ask and then what their peers would say about it. So this is a spreadsheet connected to this Google form. So here's the Google form again. And when you go to responses and you look at the view responses and sheets button, then you get this spreadsheet. And these are real questions that real students came up with. I took their last names off, but I had only asked this class for one 10-minute essay because this was a college class and I only saw them once a week. So each of them asked one question. So some of the good ones that I found, I've highlighted in green right here. They turned out to be good essays. These are all really good questions, especially for the age group of people that were in my classroom. And they were really interesting. So the way this worked was I would come into class and I would say, okay, tonight we're going to be doing Bailey's 10-minute essay. And Bailey, meanwhile, is like, I don't even remember what I asked on the 10-minute essay. I don't even remember what my question is. So I asked, his question was, if you could have any one moment, feeling, person, or thing of your imagination come to life, what would it be? That's Bailey's question. So I give everybody a chance to take out, their computer, whatever they're going to type on if we're in class face to face. And then I am timing them. And I can totally see how you could do this online too. So what you could do is pull up a timer on YouTube. You can broadcast that through Google Meet, which is what we're using to do this session right now. And you could time. Unfortunately, I can't go look over somebody's shoulder and say, hey, keep writing. But at least we can still do the activity and people I think will still gain fluency through it. So I ask his question, we all write for 10 minutes. And if this is a class that I've had a chance to talk to about this before, then I'm writing during those 10 minutes too. And I think that's a great model to show to your students. I had so many students say to me, Miss Mayer, you're the only teacher who ever has done any work that they've asked us to do in their classroom. Like, I had a kid one time say, I wish my coach would do some of the workouts that he asked us to do. So I thought that was pretty cool. And I couldn't do it every time because sometimes I had other things I had to be doing. But the kids would always be excited when I wrote their 10-minute essay. So we wrote for 10 minutes. And then if we're in the physical classroom, if it's in literal writing, then we literally hand them to the person who has asked the question. If it's online, then you'll want to gather those essays into a folder. If you're using Google Classroom, then that's going to work nicely for you because they're going to all be in a folder. You're going to share the folder with the person who's asked the question. Now remember, everybody knows before they start writing, Bailey is going to be reading this essay. Potentially Miss Mayer can see it. And Bailey is also going to be able to see it. So I know that. So I don't write anything that I'm uncomfortable with my classmates seeing. So Bailey gets anywhere between 3 days and a week to go over these 10-minute essays. And his job is not to grade them. So you got to get that out of students' heads fast. You're not grading somebody else's essays. And the way that I structured that in my classroom was the first couple of 10-minute essays they did, I gave the feedback to. So if they write something interesting, I just write, oh, that's interesting. So I'm just writing back to them. I'm just helping them feel the audience when I do that. There's no grades on these papers because I don't want them to put a grade on the paper. Does this make sense so far, Alicia?
Yeah, I'm wondering, like, what if they don't finish writing in that 10 minutes? Do you allow them to have extra time?
No. So whatever you write in 10 minutes is your
That's
response,
it.
right? Because your goal is to improve your fluency. So if
Awesome.
you come in and you can only write, 4 sentences in 10 minutes, and that's where we are when we start.
Hmm.
One thing we can look back on at the end of the school year is, wow, you can write 2 pages now in 10 minutes. And that's a great gain in writing fluency. So
Yeah.
it was really effective. I mean, I had kids come in and really barely be able to get out those 4 sentences, even in high school. And by the end of the year, if I said, I want you to write to me about this. You're really upset about something today. I want you to write to me about it. I mean, they'd be cranking out pages and pages of writing. And I really felt like it made a big difference in kids' ability to sit down and just write something, because you
Yeah.
have to get over the idea of, oh my gosh, did I spell that wrong? Oh my gosh, is that period in the wrong place? I don't know how commas are supposed to work. I don't know if there's supposed to be a paragraph. That's not what this is about. So don't grade 10-minute essays like that, because all of that stuff really stops fluency. That's for when we turn it into a finished piece.
Yeah, I
All
can see
right.
how it would be so important to model for the student before the feedback, before giving it, because I think it would be easy to get bogged down with the editing versus, the criteria of just giving constructive feedback or just a
Exactly.
comment to provide an
Exactly.
audience for them.
Yes, yes. I think that's really important. And I did it with at least 2 pieces first. And I made sure that I gave feedback to every single person that modeled what I wanted them to give to others. And that seemed really effective. I didn't have anybody ever come back and have, tried to grade the papers or put, you know, add in commas or whatever. So that worked really well. Another thing that worked really well about this was, and I'm going to screen share with you again and show you a real piece of writing I still have from when I was a high school teacher, and I still know this student. She's a veterinarian now, which I think is really cool. I'm so proud of her. And when she was a senior in high school, she wrote this 10-minute essay. So this is a real piece of writing that she wrote. You can see that it is rough. I actually scanned it from a written piece into Google Docs, which if we have time today, I'll show you that trick, because it's really handy if you do have students write on a piece of paper. Sometimes that's better for some kids and in some
Mhm.
situations. So you may want to digitize it later. So what I did is I took her written piece of writing, literally on a piece of paper. I took a picture of it. I opened it with Google Docs, had it type it, and then later on, Christy actually rewrote this paper. She used it as an essay topic for a formal assignment. So I wanted to show you a feature that Google has that a lot of people don't know about. It's actually located here underneath tools, and it's called compare documents. So it's important to know about the version history also, because in the version history, I can see every change that's ever been made to this document. So how compare documents is different is what it's going to let me do is compare one document to another document. So I have version 1 of the document here. I have version 2 of the document here, which you'll see has an MLA heading on it. It's just, you know, it's more formalized. All the paragraphs line up correctly and all that kind of stuff. And you can see in the third document that Google will generate when you use that tool, you'll see the comparison of those 2 documents with each other. So
Wow, that's
that's pretty cool,
amazing.
isn't it?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
really cool.
Every single thing that's changed to turn this into a more formal piece of writing. So it's a really, really cool tool that you'll be able to use in your classroom to see how a student's writing has progressed. So Alicia, I'm wondering, I mean, do you think the teachers would want to see how to turn a written document into a typed document? Do you think that would be?
Absolutely, I think so because this was amazing to me that I did not have to retype something out and it would pull text from an image. It's like crazy. So absolutely, I
It's
think we
really
need to
kind of
see it.
mind-blowing, isn't
Yeah, it
it?
really is.
Yeah. So you can take any piece of writing. So I have a little document in here. It's a picture I took with my phone, and it's just a picture of some handwriting I did on a piece of paper. I was just kind of testing this, like how neatly do I have to write this for this to be able to be understood by Google? So it's a JPEG, a picture I took with my phone. I uploaded it to my Google Drive. And now I see it on my computer. I can right click the picture, I can go to open with, and I can open it up with Google Docs. And when I do that, what it's going to do is it's going to put the picture of the handwriting into the document, and then it is going to type out the words that are in the document. And it's pretty incredible if there is a good reason to do, actual handwriting. And you can see that it is not perfect. For example, if you noticed how bad my H is in my original document right here, then you will see why it did were instead of here. But it put my original up at the top. If I want to, I can actually edit this picture a little bit so I can compare it to what I've written. There are some basic image editing tools inside Google Docs. So you can, double click it and get crop handles, and you can turn your picture around so you can see your original. And this will help you, do that translation to text. Even though it's not perfect, like cursive is not correct here, I think it's easier to go back and correct this than it is to type it from scratch, especially if it's a long piece.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so it's super
That's
cool.
amazing. Yeah.
Let's learn about some of the digital tools that are inside Google Docs that may help you when students are doing peer editing. So really the purpose in our session today is to think about things kids can do without you as the teacher. So if you've structured a writing assignment that kids will be able to do, and you want your kids to do peer editing with each other. So let's say Christy has decided to turn this into a final piece, and I have assigned her a peer editor, and I want her to work with her peer editor. I want to show you some ways that I would have my students do that in real life and what that would really look like. So right now, let's pretend that Christy, she's editor of this document, and no one else can see it or do anything else with it. Alicia, can you see my screen?
I can, yes.
Okay, great. So if I'm Christy and my teacher has told me Alicia is going to be your peer editor, do you think I should give Alicia the peer editor edit access of my document?
No.
I don't think so either.
No.
Because really, if I'm going to be grading Christy, I don't really want to see Alicia's writing in Christy's paper. I really only want it to be Christy's writing. So I'm going to change your access, Alicia, to commenter. And then I'm going to message this document to you and ask you to open it up so we can kind of go back and forth and kind
Okay.
of simulate what this would be like for a student to be peer editing another student. So Alicia's going to open this up, and we're going to kind of pretend this. And I can see her in there. There she is up in the top right. So even if we're working remotely, then I'm going to be able to tell when my peer editor is in there. So Alicia, would you please leave me a regular old everyday comment on this document somewhere?
Okay.
So Alicia is clicking, holding, and dragging over that kind of stray letter right there. And she's going to leave me a comment using the tools inside Google Docs about that letter. So there it is. She's told me, I think this is an extra T. And now I, as the writer, can make a decision about what to do about that. Let me show you how she did that on her side. So I'm clicking and holding and dragging over a living right here, which is what I think that's supposed to be. And now as a peer editor, I can use this add comment button, and I can say, did you mean a living? So I can leave that for my peer if they're editing this paper. Now, I think that's really good for peer editors. I don't want you to switch out your practice as a teacher of, I don't want you to just take you writing on kids' papers and switch it out for this, because this is not going to save you any time. If you want to learn more about that, come to our other session at this conference, which is really going to be about how to save time and giving feedback. But I want to show you another tool. So Alicia, I'm going to switch over to suggesting now,
Okay.
and I want you to do the same and just leave me a couple of suggestions in the document, and I will do the same on my side. So we can both be working on it at the same time. So what I'm looking at right here is this word, and I'm going to try to figure out what did Christy mean when she typed this word, and I'm going to guess she meant respect. So I just typed an R. Well, because I am in suggesting mode, what it's going to do is add in that R, and then out to the side, it's going to show me add R, that's the suggestion. And now when I zoom back out, I bet Alicia is going to have some comments or some suggestions in my document too, because there are lots of different things to be suggested here. There she is. So
Well,
she
if
did
I
it.
could do it right.
She did it. There you are. So she's made a suggestion. So I
Beautiful
can
script.
decide to accept that suggestion or reject it if I'm the writer. All right, so she suggested I replace this word with this word, and I think she's right. And as the writer, I've got to decide. So, Alicia, would you take, if you had two students you were thinking about putting together in a peer editing situation, how would you make decisions about which two students you were going to put together in that situation?
Well, I think there are definitely some different ways that you can look at it. If you have students that are at vastly different levels, though, the problem I think would be is that one is just going to do the majority of the work. So I think in this situation, you might want to put students that are a little bit closer at their levels so that I don't know. What am I trying to say?
I think I know what you're trying to say because I've said the same thing
Because
many
if
times.
if you were editing my paper, Amy, I would just be like, "Oh, Amy is a way better writer than me." Check, 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 all the way down.
And
And
that's what I do when you give me suggestions too, because you are also an awesome writer. So if I though am a C minus student and Alicia's an A plus student and my teacher assigns her as my peer editor, I'm just going to accept whatever she says. I'm not going to think critically about that. I'm just going to assume she knows better than I do and hit the
right,
check mark and move along with my life. So I really want to get kids together who are similarly skilled, so that everybody has to think critically, because that's really important. So I want to go back to this paper and I want to see what has happened now on the version history of the paper. So I'm going to accept the suggestions that have been made here. So I'm going to, for example, I'm going to suggest deleting that extra T and accept it. You can see it goes away. And now I'm going to change my mode back again from suggesting back into editing. Now remember, my peer reviewer will not be able to do that if they have comment only access, which is exactly what we want. So now I want to go into the version history of this document and I want to look and see how this document has started to evolve over time. So I clicked File, I'm going down to Version History, and I'm going to go into See Version History. Now I happen to know that I imported this file from a written PDF. I'll show you what the original looked like, because in reality, Christy Reed is one of the brightest, most capable students I've ever had in my entire life and career as a teacher. And in reality, it had hardly any errors in it at all. But do you see, Alicia, when I show you the original document, why it came through like it did?
yes, I can. She
Yeah,
wrote front and
so
back. It looks like too,
yep,
right?
yep, she
Yeah,
wrote front and back. So it's got a lot of content bleeding over from the other
yeah.
side. It's got my notes in it. It's got scratch outs in it. So all of those things are going to come across when you open. And I wonder if you noticed another thing. That original document, did you notice what kind of file type it was?
I did not.
Let me show you. So in this original document, my original is not a JPEG. The original document
Oh,
was a
PDF.
PDF. Yeah. So if my students have a PDF scanner on their phone, they can do that too. And when you get that PDF, or they get the PDF into their Google Drive, they're going to be using that same strategy that we looked at before. So let me go back and view that original file. So they can use exactly the same strategy and they can do open with Google Docs and it will open up and type the paper. So that's what this is. Now
Wow.
let's look and see what the detailed version history looks like. So now I can see, do you see here, Alicia at 2:31 today suggested these changes. Do you see, Alicia, how yours is in purple now?
Yes.
That's pretty cool. So
Yeah, it's great to be able to see who does what on here.
exactly, exactly. So if I'm like, man, I'm kind of surprised that Christy,
Mhm.
did such a great job on this. Let me go into the version history and see, oh, her peer editor may have had greater skills than she did. And so that may be why this looks cleaner than I perhaps would have expected it to. I love this too, because let's say this is the second draft. What you can do is have the students pick this moment in time with these little hot dogs up here and name the version. So they can call this second draft, for example. And maybe this is the first draft, so I can go back and name this version and call this first draft. And then when I go to show only named versions, I'll be able to see each draft of the paper all the way to the final as the student has designated it. Don't you think that would work well
I
in
think that's great. Yeah.
English class? I wish I would have had this tool. This did not exist the last time that I taught, which now I just wish I could go back and just do everything easier. Of
Right.
course, everything about teaching except for this has gotten harder since then, like every single solitary thing. This is literally the only thing that would be easier than it was then.
I agree.
Yeah, 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 and I hats off to all of you guys who are going back to the classroom this year.
Yeah.
It's a heck of a year to be a teacher. So thank you very much for your service. So
Okay.
Alicia, is there anything else you think we should look at today before we go that might
Um,
help teachers?
the only thing I was thinking, is there a way for students to be able to do voice typing if they are perhaps someone that has a little bit more difficulty with the actual handwriting or the typing?
Oh man, that is a great idea. So I I can say that probably 98% of students I taught were better at speaking than they were at writing.
Hmm.
And I think that's true for almost everybody.
I think especially young kids. I have a 6-year-old and I know that, she can tell me stories nonstop, but when it comes to finding the keys on a keyboard, she can't do it. So,
Right. Right. And who knows? I mean, she could probably quote unquote write something pretty sophisticated
right.
if she were able to use her voice, because typing, I
Hmm.
mean, I just think about how many different things we're asking students to do when we ask them to get
Yeah.
meaning from their brain and get it onto a document electronically. There's so many skills involved in that. So let's cut out some of those skills. So this tool is going to be located in tools and voice typing. And what it's going to let you and your students do is literally type with your voice. So right now I have my voice typer set on English, as you can see. If for some reason you're watching this today and you are a teacher of a language other than English, note that all of the languages that Google has are in that little drop down arrow right there, and you can ask it to listen for any language. So
Okay.
I'm going to go ahead and click my microphone. So hopefully it will start listening to me. And I want you to know that in addition to typing out the words you say, it also can do things like type a period. It can also type things like a question mark. It can do things like make a new paragraph. So you can add in some things to make your job easier when you go back and edit this later. But just think, if you were reading this aloud, what you had already written on a piece of paper, you could do a pretty good job with it. And it's so much faster.
Is that something that the person that's editing the 10-minute essays could also use for like little voice comments?
Yes, what a great idea. And if you
Mm.
come to my next session, which I happen to know you will, Alicia, because you, I think,
I
can't get
will.
out of it because we're both at work today and it's happening. In that session, I'm definitely going to show you how to do that, because I
Awesome.
love that for when students get to final draft and it's your turn as the teacher to give the feedback. I love the voice feature in Read and Write, and we're going to be examining that in the other session today. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us today. Hopefully you have some good questions and we can have a great chat in the tool that Text Help has provided for us during the conference. So I'm looking forward to hearing from you and hearing your feedback, hopefully your excitement. And don't forget about your emoji keyboard. So if you're using a Windows computer, you can hold down the Windows key and press either the period or the semicolon, and that's how you get your emoji keyboard up. And if you are using a Mac, then you can give me emoji feedback using Command Control Space bar, and that will let you actually type emojis. And if you are using a Chromebook, then you'll be able to type your emoji feedback using an extension called Joy Pixels, which I really, really love. So give me some emoji feedback in there if you haven't given me some already, and hopefully you got something great out of this session.